Good morning. This is Ron, and welcome to Story Time. And good morning. This is Ron. This is Story Time, episode 61, I believe, and we're on Law 15 of the 48 Laws of Power. And this is Sunday, July 2nd, and I'm coming to you on location in Pasadena near the Gold Line station, the Fillmore Gold Line station. Why train station? Well, because I always love to go first class. Anyways, Law 15 is crush your enemy totally. All great leaders since Moses have known that a feared enemy must be crushed completely. Sometimes they have learned this the hard way. If one ember is left alight, no matter how dimly it smolders, a fire will eventually break out. More is lost through stopping halfway than through total annihilation. The enemy will recover and will seek revenge. Crush him, not only in body, but in spirit. It is no accident that the two stories illustrating this law come from China. Chinese history abounds with examples of enemies who are left alive and return to haunt the lenient. Crush the enemy is a key strategic tenet of Sun Tzu, the 4th century BC author of The Art of War. The idea is simple. Your enemies wish you ill. There's nothing they want more than to eliminate you. If, in your struggles with them, you stop halfway or even 3/4 of the way out of mercy or hope of reconciliation, you only make them more determined, more embittered, and they will someday take revenge. They may act friendly for the time being, but this is only because you have defeated them. They have no choice but to bide their time. The solution? Have no mercy. Crush your enemies as totally as they would crush you. Ultimately, the only peace and security you can hope for from your enemies is their disappearance. Mao Zedong, a devoted reader of Sun Tzu and of Chinese history generally, knew the importance of this law. In 1934, the communist leader and some 75,000 poorly equipped soldiers fled into the desolate mountains of western China to escape Chiang Kai-shek's much larger army in what has since been called the Long March. Chiang was determined to eliminate every last communist, and by a few years later, Mao had less than 10,000 soldiers left. By 1937, in fact, when China was invaded by Japan, Chiang calculated the communists were no longer a threat. He chose to give up the chase and concentrate on the Japanese. 10 years later, the communists had recovered enough to rout Chiang's army. Chiang had forgotten the ancient wisdom of crushing the enemy. Mao had not. Chiang was pursued until he and his entire army fled to the island of Taiwan. Nothing remains of his regime in mainland China to this day. The wisdom behind crushing the enemy is as ancient as the Bible. Its first practitioner may have been Moses, who learned it from God himself. When he parted the Red Sea for the Jews, then let the water flow back over the pursuing Egyptians, so that not so much as one of them remained. When Moses returned from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments and found his people worshiping the golden calf, he had every last offender slaughtered. And just before he died, he told his followers, finally about to enter the promised land, that when they had defeated the tribes of Canaan, they should utterly destroy them, make no covenant with them, and show no mercy to them. The goal of total victory is an axiom of modern warfare and was codified by such as Karl von Clausewitz, the premier philosopher of war. Analyzing the campaigns of Napoleon, von Clausewitz wrote, "We do claim that the direct annihilation of the enemy's forces must always be the dominant consideration. Once a majority victory is achieved, there must be no talk of rest, of breathing space, but only of the pursuit, going for the enemy again, seizing his capital, attacking his reserves, and anything else that might give his country aid and comfort. The reason for this is that after war come negotiation and the division of territory. If you have only won a partial victory, you will inevitably lose in negotiation what you have gained by war. The solution is simple. Allow your enemies no options. Annihilate them, and their territory is yours to carve. The goal of power is to control your enemies completely, to make them obey your will. You cannot afford to go halfway. If they have no options, they will be forced to do your bidding. This law has applications far beyond the battlefield. Negotiation is the insidious viper that will eat away at your victory, so give your enemies nothing to negotiate, no hope, no room to maneuver. They are crushed, and that is that. Realize this, in your struggle for power, you will stir up rivalries and create enemies. There will be people you cannot win over, who will remain your enemies no matter what. But whatever wound you inflicted on them, deliberately or not, do not take their hatred personally. Just recognize that there is no possibility of peace between you, especially as long as you stay in power. If you let them stick around, they will seek revenge as certainly as night follows day. To wait for them to show their cards is just silly, as Empress Wu understood. By then, it will be too late. Be realistic. With an enemy like this around, you will never be secure. Remember the lessons of history and the wisdom of Moses and Mao. Never go halfway. It is not, of course, a question of murder. It's a question of banishment. Sufficiently weakened and then exiled from your court forever, your enemies are rendered harmless. They have no hope of recovering, insinuating themselves, and hurting you. And if they cannot be banished, at least understand that they are plotting against you and pay no heed to whatever friendliness they feign. Your only weapon in such a situation is your own wariness. If you cannot banish them immediately, then plot for the best time to act. This law should very rarely be ignored, but it does sometimes happen that it is better to let your enemies destroy themselves, if such a thing is possible, than to make them suffer by your hand. In war, for example, a good general knows that if he attacks an army when it is cornered, its soldiers will fight much more fiercely. It is sometimes better, then, to leave them an escape route, a way out. As they retreat, they wear themselves out and are ultimately more demoralized by the retreat than by any defeat he might inflict on them on the battlefield. When you have someone on the ropes, then, but only when you are sure they have no chance of recovery, you might let them hang themselves. Let them be the agents of their own destruction. The result will be the same, and you won't feel half as bad. Finally, sometimes by crushing an enemy, you embitter them so much that they spend years and years plotting revenge. The Treaty of Versailles had such an effect on the Germans. Some would argue that in the long run it would be better to show some leniency. The problem is, your leniency involves another risk. It may embolden the enemy, which still harbors a grudge, but now has some room to operate. It is almost always wiser to crush your enemy. If they plot revenge years later, do not let your guard down, but simply crush them again. And that was Law 15, crush your enemy completely, destroy them, annihilate them, and wildly entertaining chapter, like most of these are, and it's interesting to fantasize about. And but I think for most of us, I don't think most of us have enemies. We have a family, we go to work, we have maybe some hobbies and no other people outside of the family and the work, and so where are we going to have enemies? You're going to have enemies at home, your wife or your husband, or your children or something. They're going to be rivals trying to head the family or something. So again, it's very entertaining, but it's not terribly applicable, I think, to the average person. But it is a popular book, and popular in large part because of American countercultural attitudes, which insist that everything in life is fundamentally about power. It isn't. It's fundamentally about right and wrong and subordinating might to right. But again, it's a wildly entertaining book. And so next Saturday, is when I will do the next chapter. Let's take a look at that real quick. It's called Use Absence to Increase Respect and Honor. Too much circulation makes the price go down. The more you are seen and heard from, the more common you appear. If you are already established in a group, temporary withdrawal from it will make you more talked about, even more admired. You must learn when to leave. Create value through scarcity. And that will be coming up next Saturday, roughly the same time. But since this is a podcast, you can listen to it whenever you want, of course. But thank you for joining me, and have a great week, and have a great 4th of July.